tonight I'm not going to introduce him as I did last time, because, as I say, most of you were here then. I'm going to do something different. But for those of you who weren't here last time, I've got a series of sheets indicating Clive's CV. And if you have no objection, Clive, to my handing them, or people helping themselves to that, good, that's fine. Okay. Right, so this introduction, therefore, is a little bit different. A bit of history. We started this whole idea of having events and activities to encourage our shul membership, and also the possibility of bringing in new members to the shul. And in thinking about that, we asked members to produce some ideas about what they thought would be good topics and good activities. Amongst those ideas was one from Debbie, look up Debbie,
your fault, Debbie.
who suggested that it would be a good idea to have Clive Lawton, who is a well-known and stimulating speaker. Another idea was from Josh Miller. Now look, he's almost embarrassed already. I've only mentioned his name. But, and his topic was, as a suggestion, how to live as a Jew in modern Britain. Now, that was an interesting topic that I discussed with Clive, and in fact we modified that to the present series title, which is, as I said before, how to be...
is being Jewish.
Is being Jewish irrelevant to the challenges of modern society. So this is therefore a public thank you to Debbie and to Josh for having those ideas realised.
Hooray.
Right, now no clap, I think. Now the idea, the pattern of all this now is that we have a lecture divided into two sessions. The first session is going to be artificial intelligence. The second session is how to.
Well, it's about the cost of living crisis, yes. And what do we owe, or do we owe anything to the poor?
How do we owe the poor? That's right. Now, each session will last about half an hour, and each will have a quarter of an hour questions and answers, and in between the two sessions, we will have a little finger buffet that fortunately we stop people eating. So, Clive, the first session, artificial intelligence.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, Perry. And, oh yes, let's get the applause at the beginning. I don't have to work so hard. So, first of all, thanks, Josh, and to Debbie for bringing me along here. And my apologies for being late. I got snarled up in and around the Edgware Road. You may or may not know, Morocco won against Spain. And everybody was out on the streets and hooting and waving flags and stuff, and it all just gridlocked and I couldn't get through. But anyway, that's not the first time that Morocco has figured in my life. But here we are on artificial intelligence. So first of all, there's not an agreed definition of artificial intelligence, but I'll tell you what I think is my kind of working definition, which is systems, structures, arrangements which relieve people from making decisions or judgments. Okay? So decisions or judgments, not providing them with information by which they make decisions or judgments. So obviously if I want to decide whether I ought to spend more money on curing cancer or curing heart disease, right, I get some figures in. And then I sit in my room and I think, well, which do you think matters more? What will it cost? And so on and so forth. And I make the judgment. But artificial intelligence is that process by which I get machinery to make that decision for me. Okay? Now, all of us have encountered artificial intelligence, and it's something which is accelerating in capacity and sophistication at an astonishing, I was going to say alarming, but I'm not going to do that, at an astonishing rate. And you will no doubt be familiar with aspects of artificial intelligence, perhaps even unwittingly. If you ever buy anything online or something like that, it'll be there for you. If you've used a sat-nav and it gives you a route, that's using artificial intelligence very quickly figuring out the right route, right? That's not the same depending on what you've got on your car. If you've got a car and you've got a sat-nav, if you've got an old system, it will simply tell you the right route, the shortest route or whatever it is, it can do that. But if you get onto Google Maps or something, it won't just tell you the right route, it'll tell you the fastest route according to current traffic conditions. Right, and if you say, well, I don't want to do that, then it'll give you a different route, right? And furthermore, it'll talk to you, won't it? It'll say things which sound human. They don't sound metallic, robotic anymore. They sound human. They're starting to get tone of voice. They're starting to get inflections. So you remember the old Stephen Hawking voice, that metallic, robotic voice. Well, I mean, that's a thing of the past now. He could have updated it into something more chatty, but he felt it was his voice by then. But you could have made him speak much more naturally with artificial intelligence skills. We've all heard now, even if we haven't got a clue what they are, we've all heard of algorithms, all right, which are mathematical structures for determining choices. And you program that in effectively into your machine so it becomes more and more sophisticated in making choices. But more importantly, as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, is the development of what's called machine learning. So we used to be able to say it was all very straightforward, right? Machines are only as clever as the person who programs them. So if I don't put the right information in, then it can't possibly come out with the answer. And the quality of its answer, so I'm trying to play chess against a machine. The machine, I put in all the information about chess. The machine regurgitates all of that. And if it understands, it reads lots of chess books and learns lots of chess games. And as a result, it knows how to play chess. Right? And you'll recall that there were, back in the day, all kinds of famous competitions between grandmasters and particularly a thing called Big Blue. Big Blue, right, okay. Deep Blue, right, Deep Blue, whatever it was. I'm sorry, I'm not on first name terms with these computers, but you obviously are. And eventually the computer beat the grandmaster, okay. And that's very simple, actually. I mean, it's not very simple when you're trying to program it, but it's very simple, actually, because chess is a closed game in the sense that there are certain rules. Knights can only move this way, pawns can only do that. And once you've got all of that information in, then you work out at an astonishing speed the range of options that there are, and the only thing limiting you really is the computer power, the speed with which it can make calculations. It's a simple mathematical process, all right? But now they have machines which can figure out new things, work out creative options, right? How do they do that? Well, you expose them to more and more games, not just the information as to how the game works, but all the creativity that grandmasters have used through history to win a game. And once the machine starts to learn those things, it can start to learn how you play chess. Now, it's very, very different to the Deep Blue thing. The Deep Blue never learned how to play chess. It just simply did mathematical calculations and came up with the optimum choice. But now a machine can start, as it were, to think for itself. And this process of machine learning is what we really mean by artificial intelligence. Right? It's the capacity of machines to start to make decisions, which is exciting or scary, depending on your outlook. It's probably a bit of both. Now, I'll come to the Jewish aspect in a moment, but let's just think about this. The machines are still, to some degree, dependent on the quality of the data input. Now, we know this already. Some of you will have seen on TV programs and so on the face recognition thing. Now, I have a passport. I can go to the e-gates. If you've been in an airport recently, you know these e-gates, you put your passport in, right? It takes a picture, it checks that your face is the face that thing is, and by the way, you know, if I've grown my beard longer or I haven't, or I've put my glasses on and taken them off, it knows how to figure that out, and it can read my face and it can decide, except unfortunately for some reason my passport doesn't work. So it's not brilliant yet, right? But nevertheless, the theory is it can read my face, it can figure out whether I am that very chap or somebody who looks a bit like him. And if I had my twin brother there, it wouldn't let me through, because my twin brother's eyes are slightly, I haven't got a twin brother, but, you know, slightly broader across my face or whatever it is, right? It's quite clever until I'm black, right? Why? Because the information input into the Google face recognition program that is widely used was less sophisticated and sensitive towards black people. Why? Because the data that they put in was white people. Because it's Silicon Valley and they've got lots of white Californians working there, and so that's the data they put in, and so they didn't have enough. So what we've ended up with is a machine that has racial bias. Now, of course, let's remember, it doesn't have any moral quality. The machine has no ethical judgment. It's only the quality of the data that's been put in. Now, I don't know how many of you are on Instagram. I'm not. But a few months ago, Instagram launched a jolly good wheeze that people could play with, because, you know, life is empty of meaning unless you spend a lot of time doing these things. And so you could get on Instagram and it said, you know, upload pictures of you when you were young and how you are now, and people had great fun going, oh, this is me as a baby and this is me, right? It was just great fun, right? And you sent it to your friends and they had a giggle about you naked on the rug when you were 6 months old and all of that. The reason why Instagram did it was because Instagram's parent company wanted lots of pictures of people through their lives so that it could learn how a 10-year-old turns into a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old, and therefore how you might turn into a 40-year-old or a 90-year-old. Probably many of us now have seen now these predictive pictures. So I present myself now, and it will tell me what I'm going to look like when I'm 90. Now, of course, I'm not going to find that out till I'm 90, whether it's right or wrong. But how does it do this? It does this by collecting vast data collections. And the quickest and easiest way of doing that is by asking people to input it. Right? So every time one of these social media things gives you a game or an activity or an idea or a trend or a viral thing, they're probably collecting stuff in order to make themselves more and more sophisticated. Tesla cars. Does anybody here own a Tesla car? Somebody does. There's millions of them, apparently. Anyway, Tesla cars are constantly updating the software in the car. You know that Tesla cars intend, they're not quite there exactly, but intend to be entirely self-driving. You should be able to get in and go, take me to the new West End Synagogue avoiding Moroccans, and it should be able to get there. So that's the theory. And Tesla is continuously updating its software. Now, how does it do this? You don't get a little disc in the post and have to put it in and sort of wait while it does. It does it over the ether somehow. It does it through Wi-Fi connections, disconnections, right? It's constantly updating your software. Most owners don't think about this. If it can communicate, if Tesla can communicate with your car can communicate with Tesla. Right? So Tesla is continuously drawing information from your car about your journeys. Does that matter? Elon Musk knows where you went yesterday and how long you stayed there, and so on. Right? Now, why does he want to know this? I mean, partially just because knowledge is power, right? But also because Tesla is continuously learning about the nature of road traffic. Right? When the driver slams on his brakes because a dog runs into the road, the car's learning, oh, what does that happen? Now, at the moment, artificial intelligence still cannot do things that human beings find very easy. For example, if you show an artificial intelligence machine, let's call it a robot, if you show the robot pictures of cats or dogs, it will be about 90% accurate in telling you whether it's a cat or a dog. Human beings are just about 100% accurate. Right? You can show a very small child, a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, a cartoon cat and a Siamese cat and a fluffy cat and a kitten, and it will know they're all cats. You can show it 6 different breeds of dog and it'll know they're all dogs. And a cartoon dog, and it'll know that too. And a child's drawing of a dog, and it'll know that as well. The artificial intelligence is still learning. Can't get that quite right. Right? So this is to do with the quantity of data input. The more pictures it sees of cats, the more diverse cats, the more artists' imaginations of cats and so on it collects and knows that those are cats, the better and better it'll become. Right? So this is artificial intelligence. And there's artificial stupidity as well. Right? A simple example of that might be that you say to your health service artificial intelligence system, which is very good at telling you whether or not you should get excited about COVID right now or later, right? Because it's collecting all the data and it's making judgments and decisions. Should we lock down? Should we have? Should we provide vaccinations for the under 50s? Do children need it? You know, and so on. Right? It's doing all this stuff for us. We don't have to think about it because it knows. You feed into your clever health service artificial intelligence robot a simple question, like, because now we know lots about medicine, don't we? We say, Mr. or Ms. NHS robot, abolish cancer. Right? So, words and wheels and stuff. And the message goes out, right? It's worked out how to abolish cancer. It's brilliant. It just kills everybody. Right? There will be no more cancer. It's a perfect answer. Right? Send out another message. Stop road accidents. Burn all the cars. Right? These things are perfectly logical, but they're not necessarily sensible. Now, will there be a time when artificial intelligence becomes sensible, sufficient to understand the ethical or foolishness of these logical answers? Probably yes, but we're not there yet. So we have various regulations in place that artificial intelligence machines cannot do seriously dangerous things without some human intervention. Perhaps the most famous example is the use of military drones to launch missiles or bombs. There was a famous film not long ago about this. I can't remember what it's called, but it was a film about the system which now exists. We're all familiar with news from Ukraine and so on, the launching of drones. So somebody sits in a hut somewhere halfway across the planet. They hover a drone over where they want to go. They find out if it's in the right place. They establish that the right bloke is in that building, and they're going to blow it up so that they can kill the chap. And that's all fine, and they've got it on video, and they can see it, right? But there's a school group going around the building. Well, the drone doesn't care. The task of the drone is to blow up the building, and it's found the right building, the blokes that are looking, right? But the operative has to get permission as to whether or not it's acceptable to blow up a building with the school group nearby. That's how things currently stand. But it won't be long, I imagine, before we decide that, the robot's learnt enough and it's capable of making decisions like that for us. And you will know about all the attempts to regulate. For example, we talked about social media last time we met, to regulate unacceptable entries onto social media, trolls and offensive language and so forth. All of this is done by artificial intelligence, not people sitting there going, what do I think of that? Right? They put in the words that need to be recognised, and if they recognise these words, then somebody thinks about what's going on here. And very often, artificial intelligence closes something down because they've misunderstood. They're not going to allow anybody to talk about, black people or something, and therefore paint companies can't get their websites up because they're selling black paint or something like that, right? Because the artificial intelligence is not smart enough to get the differentiation. So you need people to come in then and adjudicate. But like I say, it's getting better and better all the time. In 2015, Eugene, what was his surname? Grustman, I think? Something like that. Eugene Grustman in 2015. Anybody heard of him? Famous chap. He passed the Turing test. Alan Turing, the computer chap. The Turing test, Alan Turing proposed that, he was talking about robots, but it's artificial intelligence, would never, or rather, at the point at which a robot could not be distinguished from a human, we would have to revise all of our ethical assumptions. Right? So the Turing test became, could a robot masquerade as a human to the extent that humans could not figure out whether or not it was a robot? Now, the test is not entirely satisfactory in my mind, but from time to time, computer companies and robotics firms and so on try and pass the Turing test, and they collect together a large number of assessors or testers or whatever you want to call them, and those individuals engage the machine in conversation, but by text. So you're not hearing the voice, it's text conversation, and the response comes back, right? And in 2015, Eugene Grustman persuaded more than half the people texting him that he was human, and he wasn't, he was a machine. Now, on the face of it, we all do this, like I say, we get on our computers and we say, my delivery didn't arrive, and very quickly it comes back and says it will be there on Tuesday, and you go, oh, that's very fluent and quick, right? And those of us who have Alexas and things of that sort, these machines you have in your house which teach you to be appallingly rude, you go, stop! Start! Right? And so nobody says please or thank you. I really would like the Alexa thing to require a please or a thank you before it does anything. But anyway, there you are. We're learning again to have slaves, aren't we? So you've got this machine in your house, and you say, Alexa, play, Beethoven's Fifth, and off it straight away. She says Beethoven's Fifth on Spotify, performed by the Whatnot Orchestra, and on it goes. I mean, it's just, it's seamless. It doesn't go, wait a minute, let me have a look, see what I've got, right? She doesn't do any of that. It's straight away, right? And it doesn't matter what you ask for, there she is, or if she doesn't know, she'll fess up quickly, and then try and learn. It's an astonishing thing. I mean, beyond imagining just 5 or 10 years ago. There it is in homes, or apparently more than half the homes of Britain have one of these things now.
Clive, sorry,
right?
You want Gostman? I just found him. It's a chatbot. Eugene Gostman was a chatbot.
Yes, exactly that.
It was developed by 3 Ukrainian and Russian programmers in 2001.
Right. And there it was in 2015, it fooled the testers. Now, as we said, it's a chatbot, which means to say, again, that those of you who've done this typing in on your computers and you get a response quite... It's a bit clunky, isn't it, when you do it on a company? You type in saying, where's my delivery? And it goes, I've no idea, I'll find out, whatever, right? But it's clunky. But this one managed to persuade more than half the people testing it that it was human. And we can assume that the testers here were not merely engaging in simple transactional conversation. They would be testing it by humour, by poetry, by, do you think that Keats is a romantic poet? And seeing what the response was. Right? And it managed to persuade them that it knew about those things, right? And that was 2015. You can be sure that it's got still better since then. So now, there are, of course, major ethical problems. All right, I'll name a few of them pretty quickly. One is that artificial intelligence, like all technologies, will lead to unemployment. All right? Without doubt. And it'll lead to unemployment in fields that previously did not feel like unemployment would likely be a thing, that technology would create unemployment, because we have always taken the view that manual, routine, effectively mechanical jobs, remember Aristotle calls slaves conscious machines, right? Once you move on from that, you can do away with slaves. You have machines which aren't conscious, that's even better, right? We always assumed that things that required thinking and judgment and so on were going to be human, right? Things that required fluent, competent interpersonal exchange was always going to need human participation. But if, for example, a doctor, certainly an accountant, much of whose work is technical, can be done by a machine, as the costs of those machines diminish, or the costs of the people increase, or the levels of error diminish from the machine compared to the person, then we can expect a number of professional roles to cease to exist. There's lots of evidence that surgery can frequently be carried out more effectively by machines than by people, and with fewer errors. There's lots of evidence that teaching, a significant proportion of teaching, can be conducted by artificial intelligence rather than by teachers. We can expect an awful lot of white-collar roles, not just manual roles and blue-collar roles, which have disappeared from the economy, to disappear too. The ethical problem of this, of course, is what do you do with the people? Now, it was always a problem, but the assumption was that we just educate people up to the next thing. All right, so we don't need as many people ploughing the fields because we've now got combine harvesters, whatever it might be, right? So instead, we encourage these agricultural workers to learn to read and write, and then we can use them for clerical purposes. Well, now we've got typewriters, so what do we do now? Well, we educate them in interpersonal stuff so that they can be retail workers and shop workers. Well, now we've got self-service shops, so now we'll educate them to serve people in restaurants. And now we've got self-service restaurants, so now we'll educate. Right? We keep bumping them up the system, but eventually there comes a point where if machines can do pretty well everything human beings can do in employment, then there's not going to be many jobs. However, there is still going to be, theoretically, at least the same amount of wealth being created. That is, the same number of washing machines are made, or the same number of theatre performances happen, or whatever it might be, right? There's the same amount of wealth being created. How do we share that wealth out? That's ethical problem number one.
Jewish aspects.
Sorry?
Can we have the Jewish aspect?
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes. There will be Jewish aspects. So the wealth creation problem is a clear one, and the wealth distribution problem we'll actually come back to in the second half when we talk about the cost of living crisis. But we might well look back younger ones amongst you might well look back, I'll be dead, but younger ones amongst you might well look back at this period and think, isn't it strange that we thought people had to use a significant proportion of their waking lives to just get money to live on, right? Theoretically, a country could choose to share out its wealth amongst its population, but that's certainly not the current capitalist system, right? It belongs to the people who own the means of producing wealth rather than the people who do the labour. If the people who do the labour have no more labour to do, we have already seen the trend. The more and more money goes towards the tech owners, right? They become richer and richer and richer, and more people slide down the heap into either insecure or casual labour, because there's no more labour to be done. It might solve our immigration problems. That would be great, wouldn't it? Solve our immigration problems, because there'd be no point in coming to Britain because there aren't any jobs at all, even for local people. Right? Could be that. I mean, immigration tends to move towards comparatively unskilled labour. So if unskilled labour is being done by machines, there's no point in some bloke in, I don't know where, Sierra Leone, trying to come to Britain to become a farm worker if all farm work is being done by machines. Right? So that would be an interesting development. As far as the Jewish thing is concerned, though, is this, and we come back to the Turing test. Turing says that if a machine is indistinguishable from a human being by its behaviour, then how do you treat it? Now, we're already seeing a little bit of this challenge before we come to machines in terms of contemporary talk about animal rights. Right? Now, Judaism has always talked about animal welfare and believes you should treat animals carefully. We all know, I guess, teachings about you should feed your animals before you feed yourselves, and it comes from the second paragraph of the Shema. God will put grass in your fields and you shall eat and be satisfied. God feeds the animals first, then he feeds you, right? And it's a well-known thing, I think, if you've got a pet, the parents will say to their children, it's a Jewish thing, you've got to feed the pet. You may be hungry, but you've got to feed the pet first, right? That's animal welfare is not a controversial issue. And indeed, I think most of us would think that shechita and systems of kosher slaughter require that the animal doesn't suffer. And I rather like the idea of Linda McCartney, the late wife of Paul McCartney, who had a big vegetarian empire. Linda McCartney, being a verbrannte vegetarian, used to say, "I will not eat anything with a face." Very strong vegetarian articulation. And I've always liked the idea that shechita requires that if you are going to shecht an animal, you have to look them in the face. I think it's a very important thing to do. You've got to know you are killing a living thing and take that seriously. You can't have a conveyor belt and just sweep them through, right? And not enough, I think, when disputes about shechita are made, not enough is made of the ethical quality of killing each animal consciously, attentively, rather than just kind of sweeping them through the industry because you think, well, they don't feel anything, so it doesn't matter, because we bashed them on the head or whatever we've done. So certainly animal welfare. But now people are talking about animal rights. And they're talking about animal rights because more and more scientific evidence seems to emerge that suggests that animals have some degree of consciousness, let's say. I mean, I don't just mean they're alive, but there is some suggestion that they have a kind of emotional life. That they feel fear, that they feel loyalty. Now, we all like to personify our animals. Oh, look, Rex is smiling, right? He's just got indigestion or whatever. We do that with little babies as well, don't we? Right? And so we do that, but the jury's still out, I would say, in fact, on how much animals should have rights. There's much talk about whether apes should at least be given a certain amount of rights, because aren't they a bit like human beings, and therefore, we can't do experiments on them because they didn't give permission, and all of that talk. Now, if that's true about animals, the similar kinds of issues start to emerge around conscious thinking machines, learning machines. If you can learn, are you not thinking? What does thinking mean? Now, you know that there's a common model now being proposed that your brain is just basically a very clever computer. Right? All the language is used to describe a brain makes it sound like a machine. Right? The electrical impulses and so on and so forth. The idea of the self is a very elusive idea, but a lot of neuroscience diminishes the issue of the self and suggests it can all be explained by the mechanics of the brain. Now, what's this got to do with Judaism? Judaism stands for a very categorical distinction between human beings and all other animals, let alone machines for the moment. And the thing that makes a human being different to an animal is its soul. Now, soul is not a scientific term, right? And indeed you discover that when there's talk, for example, about abortion. Abortion is indubitably killing. No, there's no doubt about that. It's definitely killing. So if we think that abortion is ever acceptable, we accept the possibility of killing as not just an acceptable thing, sometimes even the moral, the right thing. Right? And I don't think any of us think that killing is wrong in certain circumstances. Not even talking about killing human beings, or what about killing animals? And if we're vegetarian, we still kill plants. Right? Every time you munch on a banana, you've made that banana desperately unhappy. Right? I mean, obviously, if you're a blackberry, you're very pleased to be in a Ribena bottle because I've seen the adverts. But otherwise, this is we accept the concept of killing. We accept our human superiority and right to kill certain things because it suits us. We want to surround it with kindness and care and stuff like that. We want to be responsible. We don't want to destroy things unnecessarily. But if we need it, then that's what we're going to do. The soul, when we come to the issue of abortion, the soul is the only issue that abortion has to address. Because while we accept killing, we broadly don't accept murder. And murder is the killing of an innocent human being, somebody who's not trying to destroy you and not fighting in a war. They're not. It's not self-defense or anything, right? We don't believe in the killing of human beings. So the simple question is, when does this thing become a human being? I'm not discussing, is it alive? Does it have reactions to things? We know all that now. We can see inside the womb. Does it look like a human being? Yes, we can see that too. Is it human? Now, the Roman Catholic position is, as you probably all know, it becomes human at the moment of conception. And to my mind, this is a tricky one because you don't know the moment of conception till afterwards. So in fact, you're assuming or asserting some kind of moral responsibility for a thing you don't know exists, which is very strange indeed. And indeed, one would suggest then that every woman who is engaged in a sexual relationship should not under any circumstances do anything that might lead to a miscarriage, because it would be murder, or at the very least culpable homicide. Right? I don't think anybody's arguing for that. So then you get the contemporary scientific position, which is that this thing becomes human at such time as our technology enables us to keep it alive. That's very odd. Right? 40 years ago, probably found it quite difficult to keep embryos, certain fetuses, say 2 weeks old, alive, and therefore it wasn't viable, so that's that. Now we can keep them alive at 26 weeks, 24 weeks, so now it's viable, so now it's human. It's got nothing to do with the thing, it's to do with our technology, our capacity to keep it alive. Does that make it human? Surely not. Can't become human just because we got cleverer at machinery. And the Jewish position is, as you probably know, it becomes human at the moment of birth. Now, to use a Christian theological term, this is ensoulment. When does the soul enter the body? When does the fetus become a human as opposed to a fetus? Now, there's a lot of sloppy thinking around this, right? And that's why the whole argument around emotion is around abortion is so emotional. Now, this has to do with the business of artificial intelligence. Because do we believe that a machine that can exactly replicate human behaviour therefore has a soul? Or might be thought to have a soul? And if it does, must we accord it all the rights of a human? If it doesn't have a soul, do we have to accord it any rights at all? Do we need to care about the welfare of a thinking machine? Or can we just unplug it? Always assuming, of course, that it hasn't learnt to avoid being unplugged, which it could do. So, in Jewish terms, as we develop the capacity to develop something more and more humanoid, and I'm not talking now about its appearance, it might still look very odd, still look very robotic, very mechanical. But if it can start to think and engage and consider human things, for example, could a robot become a convert? What do we require of a convert? We require of a convert that they consider and have concluded that they wish to be Jewish and that they've learnt enough and can replicate, as it were, the behaviours and mannerisms and approaches of a Jew, sufficient to persuade other Jews that this person is a Jew. Right? That's all you have to do. I mean, not other Jews, Dayanim, which is always a little bit more difficult, but there it is. But that's all you have to do. You don't have to persuade them. This guy S, has done it, has crossed the line, has become one like us. Now, if we come back to Eugene Grossman, he managed to persuade people that he was a person. I don't think it would take very much more work for Eugene to persuade people that he was a Jew. Could he make a minion? Well, is he male? He's got a male name, right? So these things, I think, are issues for Jews as much as they are for every other human being. But the difference is, of course, that Jews have different answers. We have a range of ethical and spiritual and theological and legal perspectives which are different to the commonplace, to the street thought, as it were. When we come to artificial intelligence, we should remember that we have always been taught that when God says, let us make mankind in our own image, he clearly was not talking about 2 arms and 2 legs and physical imagery. He's clearly talking about something else. And the rabbis conclude that the image in which man is made, the godly image, is twofold. First, it is the capacity to speak. Right? That is understood to be a radical distinction between human beings and animals. And you will know that the animals' rights groups are trying desperately to demonstrate that animals communicate in a sophisticated way. You know, we hear about whales communicating with each other across the oceans, and elephants remembering things and having emotional relationships with family members they haven't seen for ages. You know, all of that kind of stuff. This is all part of the program of seeking to argue that animals should be treated in a manner much more like human beings. Judaism says, I'm sorry, no. Right? Animals are animals, human beings are human beings, and that's all there is to it. We don't mind saying that human beings are animals too, but that's not the point. Human beings are different. First, because they have speech, and any amount of squawking and tweeting and barking and neighing and whatnot is not the same as speech. Let us accept that monkeys can indeed communicate 12 different messages or 25 different messages. That's not the same as speech. What is remarkable about speech is that's how God created the world. God said, let there be light. What did he say? Who was he talking to? The power of speech is godlike and therefore human. Right? So that's one Jewish insight which is very strong. And the other is the capacity to choose. The capacity to choose. Now, the argument is that animals don't make choices in the same way as human beings do. Now, not all human beings, of course, there are stupid human beings. There are people with incapacitated brains who simply can't make choices, don't understand the nature of the choice. Small babies can't choose. But in a general term, human beings have the capacity to choose. Right? And we can suggest that those choices are bounded by nurture and background and lack of experience and all the rest of it, but the capacity to choose. There comes a point in extremis where at least some human beings say to themselves, I will do this and not that. The moral capacity to choose is only a human capacity because people ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That's not how God created humanity in his own image. That's a later part of the story. It's the capacity to choose, which is what Adam and Eve did when they did eat. It wasn't yet a moral decision, but it was a decision. Can animals make decisions in the same way? The Jewish argument is no, they can't. But artificial intelligence has speech and can choose. If those are the qualities of humanity, then what does Judaism have to say about those machines? That's my question, that's my challenge, and I don't think we have clear answers yet because I don't think anybody's thinking hard enough about it. I'm sure there are rabbis who've started. I'm sure there are. Right? But I don't think there's any consensus emerging yet. Yeah.
I mean, we've overrun.
Yes, I know, because I started late, forgive me.
No, it's not just like we've overrun the time as well.
Oh, right.
But I find it fascinating, Clive, because when I retired, I don't think even the phrase artificial intelligence was there. But apart from that, I've been particularly interested, as you know I am, in the Jewish aspect of all this. And I feel as though I've learned quite a lot now about what Judaism might have to say about artificial intelligence. But that's enough on my part. Let's have some questions. Who would like to start? Come on, there's Mike Taylor over there, then we'll come to you.
I don't know if there's an answer to this.
Could you speak up a bit, Mike?
But where is the location of the soul? And I have a specific reason for asking that. Where's the location of the soul in Judaism, or is that a meaningless question?
It's not a meaningless question, but I don't think that the soul is understood to have any physical identity, and therefore it can't have any place. Okay. It is somehow within us, but not being a physical thing, it would be as unanswerable as where is God exactly.
Okay, the reason I asked the question is you've asked about human beings and you've asked about robots, and can a robot be considered to be a human being? But what about a cyborg? Where does that fit in? Say you take a human brain and everything else is artificial.
Okay, well, I mean, a cyborg is at the moment still a fictional thing. Not completely though, because Tesla has developed the Neuralink, and the Neuralink is a small thing that you can have implanted in your brain, which will enable you to immediately turn your lights on without the strain of pressing a switch. Right? This is a tremendous step forward for humanity. And the Messianic Age is obviously just around the corner. But it exists and it happens. It's not science fiction. It can be done. So the idea of a cyborg, which is to have an entirely human brain transplanted into a robotic machine, is still a long way off. But there are certainly people who have prosthetic arms and legs and things like that, which can be operated from their brain, so they can be linked up in that way. The question then that you ask, Mike, is the soul in the brain? Because if it is, then a cyborg, regardless of its bodily nature, is clearly human. But if the soul is somehow in the body and not in the brain, then the cyborg presumably is not necessarily human. I would have thought that it is to do with the capacity of the machine to function in a human manner. But I don't think we're near enough. I mean, we're so far at the foothills of this that takes us far beyond.
I'm sorry, just to spread it a bit wider now, Mike.
Okay, we'll come back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alex.
Yeah, it strikes me that some of the jobs that might be saved from the AI revolution are jobs that require trust. So, for example, perhaps an AI could take my darling mother's job away by writing reams of copy and perfect, logically correct, blah, 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 whatever, doesn't really matter. But presumably her job would still be safe because there are other reasons why a human might want to hire a human lawyer, because they trust that a human is good on reputation or whatever it might be. So the question is, do you think that a sufficiently advanced AI would be able to be something that we could trust? Would we have an AI rabbi, for example? Would we trust an AI therapist?
Well, I mean, it depends on your use of the term trust. If you're talking about reliability, that kind of trust, then I don't find it difficult to imagine that AI would be far more reliable than human beings. They don't get tired, they don't mess up as a general rule if they're functioning correctly. And we certainly know already that AI carers can be much more effective than human carers, because human carers can get impatient, can oversleep and not turn up at the right time, can forget to administer the medicine on the right occasion, can get impatient and therefore not speak gently to the caree. But whereas robotic carers can do all the right things, and indeed the caree starts to learn a certain affection for the carer, who is endlessly kind and always there and not stroppy when you wake them in the middle of the night and stuff like that. So in terms of trust on that basis, reliability, there's no doubt about it that eventually, properly constructed, AI can be more reliable than human beings. You're talking about a different kind of trust, I think, which is about a level of emotional readiness to put yourself into the hands of the other. And I suspect that that's also replicable in due course, because as we learn to realise how reliable these machines are, and if their judgment is sufficiently sophisticated to look like the kinds of judgments we'd like, then yes, I don't see any reason why we should not. And by the way, I mean, having come across any number of lawyers who messed up and clearly don't understand their own documentation and fail to ask the right questions in court and all the rest of those things, which every lawyer knows is so, I mean, it can exist. Again, I would come back to the fact that if I had an utterly reliable machine that did the legal procedures, because after all, legal, to some degree, is a fairly closed system. You need to know what the law is. You need to be able to apply it in the right context and so on. There are arguments of judgment to be made within that, but a lot of it is knowing the right law, for example. So if you come up with a lawyer who doesn't know that case and present it in court and you think you're going to win and that's why you've been prepared to pay them £1,000 to come and do it, right? And then the other chap stands up and says, yes, but what about blah, blah, and the whole thing falls apart. I'd rather have a machine. So I think very few jobs are protected if artificial intelligence can get to the stage of being entirely indistinguishable. And we did that with a chatbot, with text. We're doing it with speech. It's the inflections. We haven't yet done it with humour, although artificial intelligence is starting to make funny jokes. And they're starting to make tolerable poetry. It's a bit doggerel-ish still, but they're working on it, right? So I think we could be getting there.
Okay, thank you. No, just a second. David was next. David.
Thank you. Last year's Reith lecturer...
You speak up a bit.
I thought I was.
No, just for me.
Last year's Reith lecturer was talking about artificial intelligence. He was actually an Englishman who had gone to California and become professor of one of the distinguished universities there. And he distinguished between learning systems, as you have done, which are very, very good at assembling information and so on, and intelligence. And his opinion was that the actual artificial intelligence was at an extremely rudimentary level, still. So, for example, systems that got very good at working out how to win on a battlefield and kill people very, very well were well advanced. And he was warning against such systems being generally employed as being very, very dangerous.
Well, I don't disagree. I mean, I think there's awful problems that could happen. And I haven't mentioned some of the other problems like data control and, all of those kinds of things.
But the general impression
but
general intelligence, the sort of thing that we consider as mind, is years away.
Well, I'm not sure that it is years away because these things are accelerating at astonishing speed. And of course, the more capacity machines get to learn, the faster the more they accelerate. It's the same as computing power. It's moved far faster than anybody ever anticipated. But I would say that still, the thing which is missing is empathy. The capacity to know what it's like to be human. Somebody said, who wants to live to be 100? People who are 99. Right? Now, that's not a predictable answer. You would think people who are 99 think, well, I've had a good run, right? But the people who want to live to be 100 are people who are 10. But they don't. They can't even imagine being 100. It's anciently decrepit. They'd be more than happy to pop off at 35, because what else is there left? So that empathetic thing is a long way off. But, again, it's probably learnable and replicable. Whether that's sufficient is a different thing. So I think that there's a lot of, what shall we call it, smugness at the moment as to how wonderfully unique we are. And I don't think that's going to be the issue in the end. Because, like I say, if the chatbot can fool people, and slowly but surely Alexa sounds like a member of the family, we're going to have a lot more difficulty with this.
Thank you very much. I've just got allowing time for one more question.
It's a similar question to Alex, actually, but do you see that we could end up with having judges that are robots, AI, and jurors? And would there be a need for a jury?
Well, jurors would be brilliant, wouldn't it? I mean, we know how sloppy jurors can be, right? So at some level we could say that. On the other hand, we could say that having robotic jurors feels like an abdication of responsibility. So we're going to introduce a moral quality to that. Not that it couldn't be done, but it ought not to be done by a machine. That's a human responsibility. But we're into an ethical assertion there, not a practical assertion. Judges, it is about judgment, right? And as I said at the outset, artificial intelligence is where machines relieve human beings of decisions and judgment. Now, admittedly, we're at the sort of foothills of that process, and we don't trust it enough because we know that our machines are pretty primitive, take your point. So they're going to kill everybody in order to stop cancer, or they're going to blow up the building because the bloke's inside, and they don't know how to make these other judgments. But if they are learning and learning and learning, and they're not going to make the judgment, better to run over the child because that way I won't have an accident killing 10 other people, right? Well, what does Judaism say about that? Imagine you're driving down the road, right, and you lose control of the car. The brakes fail, let's say. And there on one side is a child. No, let's not do a child because we all love children, don't we? There's an elderly person. We're all there. Waste of time. Who needs them, right? Okay, there's an elderly person standing decrepitly at the side, right? They're nearly gone anyway, so what difference does it make? And over here is a bunch of happy young things. There's 10 of them, all right? And the only thing you can do is wrench the steering wheel, right, in one direction or the other. What should you do Jewishly? And the answer is, you should take your hands off the wheel. You should take your hands off the wheel because it is not for you to make that judgment. You cannot determine the comparative value between these 10 and that one because all human life is of infinite value, and therefore 1 infinity and 10 infinities equals infinity. You cannot make that judgment. Right? That's the halachic response. The human response might be very different, and I don't think anybody would condemn you if you made a choice in the split second or something, right? But the halachic response is you cannot differentiate between human lives either because of their age or their number or their quality or their future or their past or anything like that, right? You must abdicate that choice. The same thing goes, just by the way, we've been talking before about abortion. It's very clear, the Mishnah makes this clear before we even get to it. Doesn't have to get more complicated with the Gemara. If the fetus inside the womb is likely to cause the mother danger, then the Mishnah says in the very stark terms, you should, if necessary, cut up the fetus in the womb at the moment of birth in order to relieve the mother's life. But if the fetus's head has appeared, then doctors must save whoever they can save. They must then use their technical capacity to decide which is more likely to live. Not a decision about which is more valuable, but which they can more likely save. Right, which is about their skills. That's the Mishnah. Right? So a similar sort of thing, I think, here, about what works in terms of delivering good judgment or making right decisions. Right? We shouldn't be sentimental about it.
Okay, I think I'll have to call a halt here. I'm sorry about that, but the provocative nature and the extent of your talk has raised a number of questions. I think most of us hadn't thought of them before. And that's the important and intriguing thing about something you've been saying. But can we just have a quick break? We've already overrun time. Let's eat.
Okay, go. You've got 3 minutes.